Welcome to Soma'ing, the initiative that's all about showing how being able to pay attention to the experience in our bodies is actually foundational to everything that matters to us. And where you'll learn easy and practical ways that you can pay attention to your body throughout your day to day and how that can support what matters to you. So, in this show, I'm going to be talking to different people who are going to share about different areas of their lives. So you'll get and see how this actually works in our lives and be given some tips and ideas to take into your own life and make a difference for yourself. I'm your host, Dr. Twyla Kovalenko, and I am passionate about supporting people in reconnecting to their own bodies and aligning and thriving in what really matters to them. So if you enjoy this show, please press the like button and share it with others. And if you're interested in some personalized support to bring Soma into your life, I offer one-on-one and group coaching, and I'd love to have a chat with you. So you can pop on over to my website, soma'ing.ca, and sign up for a free consult. So from there, let's get on with the show. So today on the show, I get to welcome Majero Bouman. And so I always introduce my guests. And I'm realizing every single guest that I've had so far, if you've listened to any of the previous episodes, like I have such wonderful things to say about them. And I'm just realizing I know some pretty incredible people. And it's pretty amazing that I get to have these conversations with these amazing people in my life. And so, Majero, you are one of those people that I think is pretty incredible. So, Majero, I guess we've probably known each other for over a decade at this point. We've spent many years dancing together, becoming friends and colleagues. And I've had you as my teacher. And, you know, I think even before I met you, like when we were just in community space together, I always remember your installations that you would create. And I was just blown away by what you were capable of creating, like just the attention to detail and the multi-layered meaning of your creations was really inspiring. And I've been so grateful to get to become your friend and work together. And that's also, you know, been grateful for our friendship, because there's been things that we've navigated that haven't always been easy, you know, when we work together, and there's been challenges, and just your willingness to like move and grow and explore and stay in the dance together. And I think you're an incredible teacher. I love sharing the work that you do with people because you hold some pretty amazing space.
Thank you.
So,
yeah. Mutual inspiration for sure.
Yeah. Did you want to share any? I didn't give any details of what you actually do or anything you want to.
Sure. I teach a movement practice called Open Floor, and I do that independently with Open Floor Ontario. And I'm also faculty with Open Floor International, which is an international school of life practice. I think one of the things that stands out for me with Open Floor is something that Kathy Altman says. And she says, we don't teach people to dance. We don't learn to dance. We dance to learn. And so dance is like the sneaky medium through which we're actually just getting better at life. We're learning life practice. Yeah. So that's what I can say. Oh, and maybe I should also just say that I grew up in dance because my mom's a choreographer and has run the longest standing dance school in Toronto, apart from the National Ballet of Canada. And so I'm always very proud of her with that accomplishment. So I'm going to give a little shout out to the Pia Bauman School in Toronto and have a lot of gratitude for having grown up with that creative space at my back and my front
Mm.
and my ground.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I'm really, really intrigued by this statement of we don't learn to dance, we dance to learn. And I'd love to hear more about, how that's been in your life, like how this is what is dancing to learning really meant for you.
I'm going to start answering by going way back when I was a kid.
Mm.
And because I grew up in dance, my mom wasn't allowed to dance seriously when she was growing up in Holland, but she was allowed to have dance classes. But it wasn't until she was living here in Canada and married and had had two small children that she was doing her advanced ballet exam, which requires a lot of work. It's a really intense thing. And she would just haul like her two wee kids and sit them on the floor while she was doing her advanced ballet classes. So dancing and moving the body was just what you did. That's just
Mm.
normal. And so at home, I would dance all the time. I would listen to music, I'd sit in front of the speaker and I would dance. And I didn't know, you know, ballet, but I had such a connected relationship with my body and movement, but it was a deeper connection than just like moving an arm or um, moving my body. It was experiencing lines of connection throughout this body as well as through something larger than me that held me. And so we didn't grow up with religion and we didn't grow up with church or any kind of spiritual practice, but at a very young age, movement for me offered that connection to something larger than me that moved me, that I moved in, that held me, that made me feel part of something greater and that I could connect to in the
Mm.
space of movement. I've totally forgotten what your question was because I'm so excited to talk about that. What did you say? What am I trying to respond to?
Well, I mean, it's fine, and I have a million other questions that have popped up since
I
you've been
remember
speaking. But it was the dance to learn.
dance to learn. So that was my first big learning in
Mm.
dance was that it was about connection, that
Mm.
that my body, my being, myself was part of something that was both deeper and bigger than the skin I was in. And while Open Floor offers teachings that are much more physically oriented, like about relationship between me and you, or about being on the ground, as well as the feeling of when I get ungrounded or untethered, or just expanding and contracting, like when my emotions are feeling quite expanded and fluid versus
Mhm.
contracted and fixed. We dance, we put our bodies in movement in order to recognize the sensations of all these things that we're in all the time anyway. But
Mm.
it offers us a way to articulate and become aware of the articulation so that we can notice and recognize them in our day-to-day life.
Um, so I find that really interesting. So I'm have some curiosity. You grew up um, in this space where your mom was reclaiming herself as a dancer when she hadn't been allowed that, and that's the space you were in, and also that it was quite choreographed. you know, being in ballet, and I'm not sure everything that she offers in her studio, and it still seems mostly focused on choreography. So I've been curious about, you know, your trajectory into some different forms of dance that are a lot less focused on choreography. But I'm hearing for you it was so much about the connection and the deeper understanding that it seems to make sense that you would be drawn to practices that are more explicit about what those things are instead of implicit, like ballet. And I'm curious if that resonates, or you want to share some more, especially for people watching that don't even know what open floor or what these practices are, that probably know what ballet is, and even if they've never done it, you know, kind of what it would be involved. Whereas, so maybe I have a bunch of questions then, as I
I'll
often
probably
do.
forget what I'm responding to anyway, so it's okay.
That's okay. That's okay. So I'm curious about if maybe just describing a little bit about this practice of open floor and how it works, and maybe how it's distinct from something like ballet, um, and what drew you there. If it was this, you know, more explicit focus on connection and to life, understanding of our movement in life.
Yeah, happy to do that. So what you're saying with choreography, like ballet is choreographed. It has certain positions and certain ways to move between the positions, so lines from one thing to another. And I just want to say that having done a lot of choreographed dance with dance and modern and things like that, and also been like a behind the scenes in performances. And when we'd be on the headsets and I'd be communicating with the person doing the lights and the person doing the sound and stuff like that, apart from all of the cues and making sure that things in the performance are happening, we would always have an ongoing discussion about the show because you see it a lot. And one of the things that would come up with dance is the person doing choreography, or are they dancing? And I think it's the same for acting, that there's an energetic difference. There's like a field, an energetic field, which we can feel as an audience between when somebody is just marking the time, doing the thing, like they are doing if it's acting, I don't know, you do your dialogue. And if you're dancing, you're doing choreography. And then there's a shift when you see someone who's an actor, someone who actually is embodying the dialogue. There's something very different. And somebody who's embodying the choreography, there's a very different field that is art, right? That's where choreography becomes art, or when acting becomes art. And so that line between choreography and art, I think, is a really interesting one. And it's a line that also exists in free movement practice. So open floor is an unchoreographed dance. It's free movement practice. Sometimes I waffle between calling it dance and movement, because people sometimes feel with dance like I'm not a dancer, or I'm not elegant, or I don't know many moves, so I don't dance. But if we call it movement, then we all move. You know, that's there's no holds barred. Walking is moving, sitting is moving, fidgeting is moving, and all of that is already a dance that we're in. So free movement, free dance is just to move with the body that we're in, and not only the physical body that we're in, which changes from day to day, and it changes in different parts of our lives, and with how well and how strong we are or how tired we are. It also changes with our emotion state, our emotion bodies, or what's going on with our minds, the dance of our minds, and how it also articulates the body. And so we dance in the body that we're in at any given time, and it changes moment to moment. And so what does it take to become, one, aware of the dance we're in, aware of the dance of this body, is very different than being in the performance of this body as I expect it to be and as I project the world's expectations onto me. Like, oh, I have to
Mm,
show up in this way. Nah, 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 which might be a little bit like doing choreography. And that's very different from an embodied practice of, this is where I'm in, this is the dance I'm in, my emotive space is like this, my mind is going like this, and I'm allowing all of those things to be articulate
mm,
in the moment. And we can expand that or exaggerate it, or like bring it all the way out to our fingertips and our toes in order for it to actually be a free movement dance.
mhm. Yeah, thanks for that. And I am really hearing how important this distinction between performance and embodiment has been in your practice in movement slash dances. And I'm curious, as someone who's had these practices in your entire life, how do you find they show up? Like, do you notice the distinction between performance versus embodiment and the other things that you do in your life that aren't in a studio or dance floor?
Yes. It's my
Okay.
yes. And I don't want to say that performance is bad or wrong in any way. Like, it's not that one is better or more authentic. A lot of the times we have to show up in particular ways, like in a business meeting, or I'm responsible for these things and I need to be holding them in particular ways. And so there are certain performances that go along with that. So I don't discredit performance and say there's something better
Yeah.
about being wholly embodied with who and what we are.
Can
But
I jump in and just
yeah,
before you go on, just to I think what it's not about one better than the other. It's about awareness and choice and choosing when we want to perform and when we want to be embodied, and not it being automatic and having no choice.
yeah,
That's more what I'm hearing the importance is, not so much that we want to get away from performance, because we do want to perform. I mean, there's some level of performance I'm doing here, knowing that this is recorded and trying to keep the embodiment too, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I love that. I love that distinction of choice, that there's habit and choice as a continuum, and it's just a question of our awareness practice to know where we are on that continuum at any given time between habit and choice, and
Mhm.
and how we show up. And yeah,
Yeah. And
good
so
distinction.
back to the question I asked you before about, you know, where have you been able to see the capacity to make that choice in other areas of your life that haven't been in a explicitly dance or movement realm?
How a thousand, a
Okay.
thousand ways, but one very simple one is writing. I write, excuse me, I write academically because I love thinking, and I also write creatively, and I write for other people. But before I had this movement practice, so always having been a mover, but not always having had a practice that helped me build that awareness and choice of what it meant to be moving, and what it felt like to be moving. And I was in school and I'd be writing. And sometimes, you start and it's a struggle. Well, you may not know, but I could start and writing can be a real
Mhm.
struggle.
Yeah.
And it's a fight to get in it and such a discipline. And then if you're lucky, if I'm lucky, I find the flow. And then I'm in the flow of writing and it's working. And then sometimes when it's working really well, there's a moment where I go, oh, it's working really well. And then, oh, it's gone. And so that was a moment that now makes sense to me as like, I'm in it, I'm in it, I'm in it. Oh, there's a secondary awareness that sees that I'm in it, and then sees that it's good, and then that pops me out. So it's like an untethering from being in the current of the
Mm.
thing, to being out of it, and then it gets clunky again. And then usually it would be gone before I had a practice, an embodied movement practice. move ahead a couple years and lots of practice later, where part of the practice is, very simply to move with your eyes open. It's really different to close your eyes and feel inside the body, and to start moving and really connecting with whatever wants to move and how it wants to move, and really enjoy that with our eyes closed. But to open our eyes and practice having as much sensitivity to what's happening on the inside while being in relationship to the outside world. It's like the interoception inside my body and the exteroception outside my body. All of us have a propensity. We might be more oriented toward without, what's happening in the world around us, or we might be more oriented toward our own inner sensation world. But practice allows these two spaces of awareness to to balance out in some way. So I bring that to my writing practice. I've done years and years of opening my eyes while I'm being in connection with my body and with my movement practice and what's happening there, and being an external observer of the world at the same time. And now I'm writing, and I can be in the current and fully in that internal interoceptive stream of practice, but it's writing, not moving. And then I get that external vision of, oh, this is going really well. I like what's happening here. And I can ground and stay inside the writing. And this doesn't distract from being in the writing
Yeah.
stream. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, totally. And you're highlighting something, a distinction that I think is really important. We can, awareness gives us choice of things. So, you were like, gives us the awareness that there is a choice, right? When we're aware, like, you're in it, you're not in it. Oh, there's actually a distinction and a choice. But often, and this is often times when I think many times in people's lives, I know in my own life, I'm aware that I'm doing this thing, but I'm not changing it. And it's frustrated to know that I'm doing something and not able to make the different choice. And practice is what shifts that. So the more we practice and practice in different ways. So for you, practicing on the dance floor of being tuned in what's happening inside with your eyes open, and practice so that the awareness, you actually can actualize on that choice, not just know there is a choice but not really know how to make it. Like, the practice allows you to actually make the choice and foster a new habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes. And I want to offer that knowing that there's a choice, or knowing like, oh, I noticed that this thing has happened. I was in it and now I'm not in it anymore.
Yeah.
And I need to fight to get back into the stream. Is a different kind of choice than being able to hold the two things at once and having the choice. And so choice means that we can actually act on it, and knowing that there's something that could happen, but we're not capable of doing it for whatever reason, is maybe it's also a choice, but it also feels like, if somebody's depressed and we're like, well, or if they've done a bad job, I'm terrible for this as a parent. I'm like, do better, make better choices. We're not always capable of making better choices. Sometimes we're at the mercy of the life that we're in, or the moment that we're in, or the pattern that is holding us. And we're really just held in patterns because they're cultural, or they're familial, they're in our DNA, we've learned them, and they're ingrained at such a deep level that we can see there are alternative things that might be done, but we don't have the option of stepping outside of what we're in
Yeah,
as a choice. But practice, yes, practice is the thing that opens up the possibility to start having action possibilities in those moments.
totally. I mean, so much of our movements happen out of habit, happen automatically. Like, when's the last time? Well, maybe you more than most people noticed, you're really paid attention to what you're doing as you're walking. We've practiced walking for so many years, and we're, like many of the things, like when we move through our routines, to change something about our routine, about these movements that we've practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, really takes either a lot of paying attention, which, there's where our minds are constantly being turned to other things that are calling our attention. To be paying attention to the movement we're doing all the time wouldn't even be practical. There's other things that we need to attend to. And so you're really speaking to how your years of practice have given your body another pathway so that it can happen. Just like, so it sounds like the writing, that you're that you've cultivated the practice of being able to stay in it, that it's not this like forcing or fighting that you used to have to do. Now there's a new habit pathway, and that's how we create them, but we create them with the entirety of our bodies. It's not just a mental thing. There's a movement involved in whatever that, instead of choosing to stay up and watch TV, which, we're moving, making a different choice would require practicing.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's the neuroscience adage of nerves that wire together, fire together. And in order to actually wire and fire our nervous systems in a different pattern, we need to practice. We need to create that pathway purposefully so that when we need it, when I'm in my writing practice, or in my, it's hard to call it all practice. So when I'm writing, let's say a chapter, because I've been practicing on purpose, consciously making a different neural pathway, it's already there for me. I don't have to try and create it in the moment. It's already there. I think Picasso says inspiration exists, but it has to find you working. And it's the same thing, like that choice exists, but we have to have made it possible to make the choice. And that's the practice side of things. And I got really excited there. Can I, that I love philosophy and cultural theory. And there's a French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu, who writes about the body in a lot of ways. And Bourdieu studied education systems in France and how when we think about education and children in school, we think reading, writing, arithmetic. Those are the things they're learning. And Bourdieu suggests that actually the most important pieces of what they're learning are the things that are never spoken and never taught in that way. Those things are how to hold our bodies, how to sit still, how to stand in lines, how to move through space. And so the real education that's happening is all through the body. And that's the most difficult education to change. Once something is in the body, that's where culture lives.
Yeah.
Our bodies are culturally constructed patterns. And it's a political act to choose to inhabit our bodies, not just be bodies in the world, but to choose to inhabit our bodies and move in creative ways in order to not just discover how we are articulated by culture, but in order to create the possibilities of difference. And we see this now happening because of all the work with trauma and recognizing that talk theory is great, but if we're not also engaging how trauma resides in the body, then it doesn't have the same possibility of changing, and how actually, race resides in the body, and how all of our cultural dispositions and positions reside in the body. And so we need to be working through the body to make these possibilities of difference, possibilities of choice.
Yeah, and I'm curious if you, just to speak more specifically in your experience about that, like do you have some experiential knowledge of this process through your own life and your own body and the systems that you find yourself in, of being intentional and conscious, and um, about the movements that you're making, and what is what your body has taken on, like those patterns that you've been conditioned into, and being intentional and conscious and practicing something.
That's a great question. And the first thing is, I think that that's life work.
Mm,
It's life work to become conscious of the embodied patterns that hold us.
mm, mhm,
So, so I'm in it and mostly lost, mostly lost. But yes, uh, I have intimations of how my body is enculturated, and how I can create choice through my practice. And if I had to give like clear examples, I mean, parenting is the easy one.
mm,
That, parenting is passed on from parent to child. We parent the way we've been parented, and there are habits and patterns and emotional patterns that are a part of that. And it takes a lot of work to change that pattern. And I'm really fortunate to have been parented really well. And I'm also aware of cultural patterns of parenting that are a part of being in a, middle white Canadian big city place. Um, and part of what is normalized in that would be, and that I saw coming up in my own body, would be moments of overwhelm. So, like, it's all getting too much and getting overwhelmed, and then yelling, or too much. Yeah, that's it. Too much, getting overwhelmed, and yelling, and and meeting meeting the challenge with a hard edge, let's say, right? When the kids are having a hard time, the hard edge comes up in my body, and I would set boundaries or create something hard.
mm,
And movement practice and discovering, just even in my own body, oh, if this is hard, if I meet what's difficult in my own body with hardness, does that actually help the difficult part to ease?
mm,
Not really. It doesn't actually help very much. So what other ways, so I'm moving creatively, and I'm in a dance practice, and I'm just exploring and playing with what's possible. And uh and so I found not just not an opposite way, but maybe many different ways to be with it. And so doing things instead where, if my kid was having a hard time, then I could get down on the floor the same size as the kid and offer them my body. And instead of me disciplining or being angry, I could say, I feel that, or I can see that you're pushing against, you're pushing, you're angry. Why don't you push on my body? Just take
Mm.
all of the energy that you have that's moving in you right now and push against me. And that way I can provide that body with an avenue to express itself instead of being like an emotional gorilla, like a big emotional thing. I can instead be as big as the child and allow the body's child to express what's coming out of them, and it makes me receptive at the same time as I'm being strong. So I'm
Mm.
providing a container for their emotive space rather than subduing their emotive space by having a bigger emotion.
Yeah.
So it's containment, and it's helping express, but not putting down and back, you know. Um, and so that's something that I learned through movement practice, was not to, I don't know, what's the word for this? Not to oppress
Mm.
an emotional space, not to repress an emotional space,
Mm.
but instead to receive the emotional space and at the same time hold it,
Mm.
you know, be strong enough to allow it and to contain it at the same time, not
Mhm.
repress it.
That's amazing. And so I think I'm hearing that a lot of what's opened up possibilities of different choices or different ways of moving when you're writing, when you're parenting, when you're in different spaces in situations in your life have been intentional movement practice, such as open floor. Has that been one of the largest pieces that's allowed you to cultivate, like to become aware of your patterns and intend new and practice new patterns?
Yeah, we dance to learn. That's
Yeah.
that goes right back there. And the reason that I am really, you know, still deeply learning with open floor at the same time as, you know, I teach it, but I'm also learning it as my own practice, is because it's just based in normal everyday movements of life. And that when I practice normal everyday things like moving toward and away,
Mm.
it's really, you know, like it seems it's a weird pattern. I don't know. Move towards something, move away from something, move towards something, move away from something. Make that a dance, make it a curiosity, a choreography of the moment, an expression of all the different things that I might be moving toward and away from. Just doing that again and again as a practice means that in my daily life, I'll be moving toward and away, and there's a little thing that goes, oh, you have a pattern of how you move away from things. Remember that from when you were dancing, and that pattern kept coming up again and again. Here it is again. It's the same habit. And so that's
Mhm.
how I become aware of those enculturated spaces. It doesn't mean that I can necessarily step out of the habit,
Yeah.
but becoming aware of the habit is often enough to know that it's there.
Mhm. And I'm curious because, I know that you do have this dance practice, and I suspect, like most of us, still the majority of the hours of your day are not in this intentional practice. The majority hours of your day, like most of our days, are all the other things that we're attending to, the responsibilities and the routines and um, yeah, the living of it all. And are there specific ways that you intend to cultivate more awareness of the experience in your body as you move through, the parenting, the grocery shopping, the writing, the house cleaning, the whatever all those pieces are that make up your day?
I'm going to see if I understand what you were saying. Are there
Yeah.
specific ways to intend that practice in the everyday?
Just so what I'm hearing is, like when you're practicing open floor or intentional movement practice, there's a space of in really intending that whole time to be aware of this experience in your body. And it's very easy as we move through the routines of our lives and are paying attention to what's on the grocery list or whatever it is, that we don't pay attention to that experience in our bodies. So I'm curious, when you're in the day-to-day of life, are there ways that you have ways of bringing some of your attention, at least some of the time, to the experience in your body alongside, paying attention to all the other things?
Yes.
Okay.
The first thing that comes up for me is that even in purposeful movement practice, one of the continuums that Open Floor works with is presence and absence. And to practice presence and absence purposefully lets us recognize that not only being present is a skill, but absenting ourselves is a skill as well. And there are a lot of times in life where it's really necessary and useful and most efficacious to absence ourselves, like on an 8-hour plane ride. We don't want to be intensely present for that whole thing. Maybe it's a skill to be able to absence ourselves in certain ways. Daydreaming is an intentional absenting of ourselves. And there's so much that can happen in our non-conscious processing brains when we shut down this frontal cortex of really focused, like vector-based thinking, which is getting us to places. If we just like go, shh, quiet, and allow this daydreaming world to come on, then if we have an issue, a problem that we're trying to work out, the creative brain turns on when we become absent. And so I'm talking about this continuum of presence and absence because on the dance floor, it's not always just a practice of being present to the somatic practice, but sometimes it's a purposeful practicing of dissolving, of absenting. And that's really beautiful too, because that's also part of life and it's a skill. So inviting absence onto the dance floor is one piece of my answer, and then my other answer is the practice of daily life. How do I cue into the practice of daily life like 1,000 times a day? Is my weight is one of them. My breath is another one. Sensation is another one. So I just finished writing a chapter for a book called Overwhelming Us, and that chapter is called Practice and Life. And one of the things that started to make really sense when I was working on writing about overwhelm was that it's very difficult. Like, we're not really good in the English language. We don't have a good lexicon of words to give to sensations in our bodies.
Yeah.
We just have sensations, but we can't say, or it's it's not a normal easy lexicon to draw on to say there's tingling, there's bubbles, there's shakiness, there's wobbles, there's and when, because I love language and I love words, so inviting a practice of starting to name the sensations that are, bring language to the sensations is a way of also cueing into just getting curious about what the sensations are. Well, what is that in the right of my lower back right now that I'm feeling? It's a pull. If there was a color to it, it would be gray. If there was a shape to it, it would be a squiggle. And so building curiosity into sensation is something that I do a lot in the relationship between sensation and language. And I talked about weight. So the thing that I do with weight is I just notice, where is weight collected in my body? Where is I'm sitting here, you can't quite see me, but I my legs kind of on this side of
Yeah.
me and my body kind of on this side. So how is the weight dropping down through my body? And I'm sitting on a couch. So there are areas of my body that are carrying more weight than others on the couch.
Mhm.
And I think of that. I had an artist friend who did a lot of what do you call that when you just sketch bodies? Live sketching of bodies. Still lives? No, that's with fruit. Anyways,
I don't know. I know what you're talking about, but
yeah,
I'm
he would talk about when you're looking at a body and you're sketching it, you look at how weight is collected in the body, and you might want to shade those areas of the body where the weight is collected. And I think of that as an awareness practice of just wherever I'm sitting. If I start to notice, oh, I'm sore right now, then I might get curious about, oh, how is that sore? How is the weight falling? If I were drawing this, where would I be shading into my body to recognize the points of contact between my body and what I'm on? And then if I shift, how does that shading, how does the weight
Mhm.
density, like the densities of my body change?
Mhm.
Um,
I mean, I'm hearing that like sometimes discomfort might cue this tuning in and paying attention. And outside of that, is it more just practice of, or is there something that you find cues you to be like, oh, my weight, my sensation, naming it? Like, what is it that cues you to do that?
Discomfort is a good one because it's easy,
Yeah.
but also just difference. I
Mm.
walk in the forest a lot because I'm lucky enough to live with a forest in my backyard, and there's a lot of rocks and there's a lot of soil, and the ground is doing this all the time. It's harder when you're on sidewalks and the walking is all just like flat and uninteresting. But when the ground is changing all the time under my feet,
Mm.
it's a reminder to notice, you know, when my foot is on a rock like this versus like this, or there are so many different ways to be in relationship. And I think that what just became clear to me when I say that is that it's the relationship with my body, with the sensing, feeling, internal, infinite piece of me, um, is something that I access
Mm.
through relationship with what's holding me on the couch, with the ground that I'm walking on, with another person. You know, as soon as I turn toward another person, I'm so aware of if there's rising up here in my chest, or if there's tightness in my lower belly, or um, how it's showing up in my hands or my jaw. I think I have a certain amount of social anxiety. So maybe that's the discomfort part. When I turn
Mm.
toward a person, there are certain physical cues that because I practice
Yeah.
physical awareness, um, I I notice them.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that's a question of practice.
Yeah.
When we practice physical awareness, we notice physical awareness.
Yeah. Well, I love speaking to you. I'm glad to, every time I get a chance to dive in, there's always so much um, interesting directions that we move in our conversations. I love how much experience, how much reflection, how much insight, um, and how much deep experiential knowledge you also share. You're always sparking new things for me when we're talking. And I know we could talk forever. Well, I don't know, forever. Maybe that's exaggeration, but
I just want to say
this
you're a good question asker. You're a great listener and question asker.
well, thank you. And I know we'll continue our conversations, and I look forward to moving and writing and dancing and everything with you. And I'd love to, before we finish up today, for you to share how people can find you, things you've written, to practice with you, to get a taste of open floor and what you facilitate, and get an opportunity to explore some of these practices that you're talking about?
I think the easiest way is to check out whatever's going on through my website, which is openfloor.ca, openfloor one word, .ca. And whatever I'm offering will be there. It's Open Floor Ontario. And you can also just reach me to send an email. But my name is kind of a weird one, majero@openfloor.org. And that is an email through Open Floor International, which is the big international school research group center that I'm a part of. So yeah. And I have hesitation with openfloor.ca because there's a good handful of people that are in teacher training right now in Open Floor that are from Ontario. And my hope is that they will be on that Open Floor Ontario landing place. And so it's possible that if you're listening from Ontario, there's a whole lot of local Open Floor that will be becoming available in the next little while. And there's international access to Open Floor through openfloor.org, or you can just find me, Majero@openfloor.org.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. I'll include that in the links. And also, because of our conversation, I'm wanting to put a little plug in for my new free offering, because we've been talking about, all this conditioning and the ways that basically we're bound. So I have these new lunchtime free lunch and learn sessions on Tuesdays that are all about exploring that, like the ways. It's called Bound and Unbound. So I wanted to share that with the audience too, because I've been really excited. So I'm exploring in only 45 minutes some of the ideas about how we can feel really stuck in our lives, and the ways that we actually are, framed by so many pieces, by culture, by language, by the shapes of our bodies, and how we can have more sense of freedom and capacity within that. So it's one of the things.
Beautiful title, Twyla.
Started doing, but feels exciting and feels so relevant, and that's why I get excited when we're talking about it. I'm like, yes, this is what I want to keep sharing about more, and having people have more awareness, so they have the choice and the practice so that they can make those choices that they want to make. Yeah, so thank you so much for the work you do in empowering people in that.
Thank you for the work you do in bringing all of these great discussions into the culture at large. It's really, really beautiful, beautiful practice.
Thank you. Well, it's pretty enjoyable for me too. I get to have this awesome conversation with you today. So thanks.
Thank you.
So that's the end of today's show. I really hope that you got something from this conversation today that can make a difference in your life. Again, if you enjoyed this show, please press the like button, leave us a comment, and please feel free to get in touch with me, sharing any show ideas and finding out more about the work that I do about connecting to our bodies and connecting to what matters to us. That's soma'ing.ca. And until next time, remember, we can soma anytime and anywhere.